Hello, everybody, and welcome to this special recording of our webinar from the other day. My name is Shane Addison, and I'm an advisor for the stakeholder engagement stream at ID Support New South Wales. Now, for those of you not familiar with ID Support New South Wales, we are a business unit within the New South Wales government, and we were established to address the issues of identity misuse for customers, businesses, and the government. Now, essentially, when it comes to issues of identity crime, we aim to prevent, respond, and recover. Now, October is Small Business Month, and to mark the occasion, ID Support and our new lovable mascot, Kel the Koala, have been putting on some special sessions focusing on the issues small businesses face in protecting their customer data, particularly the issues smaller businesses or contractors such as yourselves may be contending with. Now, before we jump into all that, I'd like to begin our session by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land of which we all meet today, and any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people participating in the session. I pay my respects to elders past and present, and celebrate the diversity of Aboriginal peoples and their ongoing cultures and connections to the lands and waters of New South Wales. So, what does today's agenda look like? First, we will talk a little bit more about ID Support New South Wales, who we are and what we offer. We're going to talk about the value of personal information and why criminals are after it. And then we're going to dive into breach response, some common scam trends, and how to identify a scam before taking a closer look at password security and closing out with some practical steps to protect your business. So, ID Support New South Wales, like I mentioned earlier, we are a relatively new business unit within the Department of Customer Service, and we were established to make it easier for people to access help when or if their proof of identity credentials are stolen or fraudulently used. We want to assist individuals that are impacted by data breaches or identity-related crime, regardless of how or where their identity information was compromised. And we do that in three ways, the first being immediate victim support. Our contact center advisors, who are available between Monday to Friday, 9 to 5, provide one-on-one case management for anyone impacted by a data breach, scams, or identity theft. Now, if your case cannot be remediated in that one call and you need to call us back, you'll get to speak with the same case manager, reducing the likelihood of retelling your story multiple times. And we also work across government and industry to strengthen identity resilience, advocating for change with the way identity documents and personal information are collected and stored. And we have an awareness and education team, which delivers community engagement programs like this webinar, as we believe education is key. Understanding threats is the best way to recognize them and to protect your personal information. Now, data breaches make up a significant amount of our work, so let me begin by setting the scene for why we care about data breaches and their impact. Firstly, what is a data breach? You might be wondering. Well, a data breach happens when personal information is accessed, lost, or disclosed without authorization. Data breaches often lead to identity crime or people being scammed, which is why we're so invested here. For an idea of scale, in the ACCC's latest targeting scams report, they estimate that Australians lost $2.03 billion to scams in 2024. And they saw over 494,000 scam reports made. Now, the good news is that amount that we've lost to scams has decreased. But still, that is a lot of our hard-earned money being handed over to criminals and often leaving our economy. Data breaches are coming thick and fast. Everyone knows that Australia has had a pretty bad run recently. For an idea of some of the scales, one of the more recent ones, Qantas, we've got over 5 million individuals impacted. Another big one that you may be familiar with, Optus, almost 10 million individuals were impacted by that. Medibank, very similar numbers, almost 10 million. And Latitude, that was almost 15 million Australians impacted. So, if it feels like we're getting smashed by data breaches in the past 2 years, it's because we have been. Australia actually had the highest data breach density in the world in the last quarter of 2022. which was 24 times more than the global average. So we've definitely lifted our standing since then, but it just goes to show how at risk we are in Australia. Now, at this point in the webinar, I usually put a question out to everybody. If you're watching this recording, it might not be as interactive, but I want to know, how many Australians do you think were affected by identity crime at some point in their lives? Was it 1 in 4, 1 in 6, 1 in 10, or 1 in 20? I'll give you a minute there if you're watching to consider it. The answer is actually 1 in 4. That's right. It's starting to feel like not if it will happen, but when it will happen. So it's really important to know that we can all be a victim. Doesn't matter who you are, what you do, where you live, your personal information is sadly at risk. So the big question we often get is, what is personal information actually? Often people clock that our driver license and passport fall under that, but what people don't often get is that personal information is any information that helps identify you as an individual. Well, this can include many things like your name, your address, your date of birth, your contact information, your signature, medical information, driver license details, Medicare number. See some of these more obvious ones that we do associate as well. Your passport information and your tax file number, right? All of these things are used by criminals to paint a more detailed picture of who you are to help them enact frauds or scams. Now, why do criminals want our information? As I alluded to in that last slide, it's for frauds and scams, obviously, but also it can be used to turn a profit on the dark web. Selling stolen data to other criminals on the dark web is very profitable and quite easy for these criminals to do. So I've provided some shots of the dark web, some examples of passports and driver's licenses for sale. Essentially, it's like a low budget eBay where they're bidding with crypto on people's credentials. Once they have these, they can then scam the individual, having their personal information, or they can apply for loans and credit cards under the victim's name and even file fraudulent tax returns. Now, as small business owners, handling personal information about your customers allows you to provide services, but it also means you guys have an elevated level of responsibility when it comes to personal information. You need to worry about your own personal information as well as your customers. Now, this is both from a moral point of view, but also a reputational and a financial one. Cyber incidents can often destroy small businesses. Now, there is a lot to protecting personal information, which we're going to cover in a bit more depth, but there are 3 things in particular you guys should be asking yourself when you're thinking about customer information. You need to be thinking about how you're collecting customer data, how you're storing it, and how important it is to protect that customer's personal information. Now, when we talk about protecting customer data, we inevitably end up talking about cybersecurity, which to many small businesses sounds like a terrifyingly expensive endeavor. But I'm here to assure you that it doesn't have to be. A lot of what we're going to talk about is about having clear processes and policies in place and having what we call good cyber hygiene. So when it comes to storing customer data, we need to be asking ourselves, is the information that you have about your clients correct and up to date? Now, if not, why are we holding on to it? Right? Because this isn't useful to you, but it could be useful to a cyber criminal. Now, this now is a risk and not an asset. So we either need to update or delete any out-of-date information where possible. And the next thing we need to ask ourselves is the information we have relevant? While it's nice to send a client a message on their birthday, having this level of personal information like a date of birth is probably more of a liability than an asset for businesses. With all your data, you need to be asking yourself, do you need to store your customer's personal information? And if you do, for how long? And is it relevant to your systems? And finally, you need to be asking yourself how you're storing your customer's information. Now we can get into the more technical things here, like do you have protocols in place as to who can access this data, including vendors and contractors. Um, we can be looking at what systems and applications integrate with the data, what governance is applied to the storage and handling environments. But this can also include simple things like system updates, having them being done as soon as they're available. It can also include really basic stuff like, not leaving photos of customers' personal data on your phone, which, that's a really big one that happens in small businesses, particularly ones where people have to work outside an office, and it's really easy to get a quick snap of something if the systems are down, but having your phone compromised would mean that all that customer data would be compromised too. So it's an additional risk that you're taking on if you're storing customer data in that way. So having rules in place or policies to manage these challenges and risks is really critical. So just to drive it home, it's worth weighing up if the data being collected is even useful or appropriate. You need to make sure that you're only gathering personal information that is necessary to carry out your business. You should be asking yourself, do I need this data? Do I need to keep a full scan, or can I mask some details? How long should I keep this data stored? And when your information is no longer required, you need to take reasonable steps to destroy or de-identify the personal information you hold. Collecting and storing unnecessary information breaches privacy and creates risks. So it's important to review your current processes and consider just how much personal information you actually need to collect from your customers. At ID Support New South Wales, we thankfully have a tool to help you with these decisions. It's called the Personal Information Risk Assessment Tool, or PIRATE for short. PIRATE is designed to help anyone who handles personal information, whether you're a part of a large or a small business. The PIRATE tool is simply a very strong risk calculator that helps businesses get a better picture of their data and how a data breach might affect them. Pirate Risk Score looks at the risks and effects that people and businesses could face if their data is stolen, and helps businesses decide which security steps to take first. Now, the Pirate delivers a customized report that contains an instant risk score, or a Pirate score, contains a summary of risks and consequences for impacted individuals, and a list of remediation steps required to recover or protect the individual from further harm or risk. The risk value assesses the likelihood of information abuse, the extent of personal harm and risk, and the complexity of the measures required to minimize further harm or misuse. Now, in the interest of time, I won't be doing a demonstration, but I strongly recommend you jump on our website and take a look at it. In the event of a potential data breach, it is crucial to follow a structured response plan. The Office of the Australian Information Commissioner outlines a 4-step process: contain, assess, notify, and review. These broad strokes are really great guiding principles for how you should build your response plan out. So the first one, contain. Take immediate measures to restrict further access to the compromised personal information. For many of you, that may be as simple as disconnecting your laptop from the internet, stopping hackers from extracting more information. That is really all we're trying to do there. Assess. We want to gather facts and evaluate risks, including potential harm to affected individuals. You want to initiate an assessment and investigate relevant information about the incident to understand its scope. This may be fairly challenging for a small business. You may need to hire in a contractor to help with this, or do your absolute best within this step. It is quite challenging, so I understand the scope that we're talking about here. It is a big ask. Now, the next step is notify. Notification is a vital mitigation strategy, but it should be approached carefully. So you need to consider the potential stress or harm caused by notifying individuals, especially if the risk is minimal. So you really need to evaluate each incident individually to determine the necessity of issuing a breach notification. And finally, you want to review. So you want to analyze the incident and identify actions to prevent further breaches. This could be conducting audits, security reviews, changing your staff training, or some policy changes to enhance those prevention measures. Additionally, it is advisable to seek help. Law firms specializing in cyber practices, particularly breach response, can offer valuable support. Consider seeking assistance from experienced professionals, especially if customers in New South Wales are impacted. Your response plans specifics, they'll really depend on factors such as your credential type and the number of impacted individuals. ID Support has some tools to help aid in recovery, so reaching out to us is really recommended in these situations as well. Now, for businesses, the three biggest scam trends we like to raise awareness about are phishing, business email compromise, and malware or ransomware. Now, first, let's start with phishing. Phishing attacks are fraudulent attempts to obtain sensitive information such as usernames, passwords, credit card numbers, any personal information, really. And they do this by impersonating a trustworthy entity. Phishing scams may ask you to reply to the email and include things such as your password or personal information, or they may ask you to click a link to visit a website. The scammers want to trick you into thinking they are a trustworthy organization, but when you receive an email, you need to pause, and you really need to look out for some signs that could indicate that it's not legitimate. So indicators of a phishing attack are potentially an incorrect sender or email domain, something that looks very close to the genuine article, but is slightly off. Maybe there's a 1 instead of an L there. Paying attention to the actual sender's address is one of the first things we tell people to do. The next thing is the email's formatting. If there's something unusual, maybe there's spelling errors, maybe there's a generic greeting, dear customer, perhaps it's just misaligned. It doesn't look like it's come from the organization it's saying is. Next thing we want to look out for is misleading hyperlinks and unsolicited attachments. So, if you're not expecting an email from someone and it comes with an attachment, that's usually a little bit of a red flag. Also, if they've got a hyperlink in there and it says click here, for more information, and you hover over it and you realize it's going actually to a completely different address than what they're saying it is, that's a massive red flag. And finally, a sense of urgency. All scammers want to create a sense of urgency. They want you to act quickly before you think things through. So if you're getting rushed to do anything, that is a big red flag that you may be looking at a scam. So I want to take a little bit of a closer look at phishing. So I've got a little example here. This may seem like an ordinary email. It can be very tricky to figure out that it's actually a scam, but we're going to go through the steps that show us that it's not legitimate. So with this first email, the first thing I notice is the domain name. So if we look at that address, it's really coming from an unknown sender, and it's using a generic name to mimic a government department. The next thing is the sense of urgency there in the subject line. Urgent, pay now. These sort of things are put in there to create a sort of fight or flight response, making people take action before they've actually thought things through. So that's another red flag. The next thing is it's not personally directed to you. As you can see at the heading there, we've got Dear Customer. The message also has a generic signature line. If we can see there's no person that's actually attributed to. They've just said it's the organization. So these can be big red flags too. If we look at that link, after you hover over it, you can see that it's actually taking you to a suspicious website, which is not where it's saying it's going to send you. So yeah, you really want to be looking out for those things. You should never click on links in email messages or open attachments from people or organizations you don't know. Another cyber risk impacting small business is business email compromise. This is where scammers take control of legitimate organizations' email addresses. It is basically a form of email fraud. They'll target organizations and try to scam them out of money or goods, attempting to trick employees into revealing important business information, often by impersonating trusted senders. Business email compromise can also involve a cybercriminal gaining access to a business email address and then sending off spear phishing emails to clients and customers for information or payment. The three red flags to look for here are uncommon requests. Maybe the request has been made by someone different, or the payment details are different on you. The second being the sense of urgency. Like most scams, the degree of urgency forces us to act before thinking. And finally, it can be a red flag if people are using personal emails for business activity. Scammers try to impersonate someone from the organization, and maybe it's the person's name but at Gmail as opposed to the actual company's email address. So it's important to understand that all of us can fall victim at any time from these sort of attacks. They're really quite sophisticated. Scammers are really getting quite good at this stuff, particularly with the rise of AI. They have developed ways to disguise themselves as legitimate professionals, and you can lose money like one of our callers, Georgia. So Georgia was a woman who called ID support, and she was a small business owner and was victim to an email hacking scam. A regular supplier who Georgia had been dealing with for years sent her an email saying there was a change in their payment details and they needed to be updated before paying an invoice. Yes, sorry. The scammers sent invoices with the amended bank details and also an email trail of earlier messages. So what Georgia didn't know is the scammer had gained access to the supplier's email address. And because she had seen this email address before, and it had those perfect copies of the invoices that she had previously paid, she really didn't notice any difference. She was thinking it was real, and so she transferred over $40,000, which the real supplier never received. The change in bank details was literally the only sign that this was a scam. Scammers can pose as regular suppliers. They can use their logo and letterhead, so it's very convincing that it is legitimate. So, being so difficult to spot, how could Georgia have avoided this? In any situation like this, we recommend you contact the supplier directly, especially if there's any request to change bank details. You want to use a second method of communication to ensure the request is legitimate. So you want to call them on a number you know is a way to contact that supplier. You don't want to be replying directly to the email because then you'll be talking to the scammer. You should also consider a multi-person approval process for transactions over a certain amount. This process will ensure that the business that's billing you is a normal one that you deal with. Now, for protecting your own business email addresses from being compromised, it's important that you protect your IT systems by running antivirus software, keeping your systems up to date, and your IT security up to date, and having a good firewall to protect your data. Business email compromise has rapidly increased, especially with the transition to work from home arrangements. So it's really important that you and your staff are aware of these scams so you can spot them and avoid them. Finally, ransomware is one of the most common and disruptive threats to small business. Ransomware is a type of malware, and when it gets into your device, it can make your computer or its files unusable. Not only can criminals encrypt files and render them inaccessible, but they are now using ransomware to steal data, including IP and personal information of employees and customers, often demanding payment in return for not publishing the stolen information. Ransomware is impacted across a range of sectors, including healthcare, transport, logistics. It's a very significant and damaging form of cybercrime. And it does raise a lot of questions for those businesses. Should you pay? Should you negotiate? Do you pay a huge sum of money, or do you risk losing even more? Do you pay the ransom or not? There are so many risks in paying, and there are so many risks in not paying. There's really no easy way out. And you need to consider the effects on your business and think of being in the position. All right, can you afford a top-tier law firm? Can you afford to pay tens of thousands of dollars a day for a forensic analysis? If you were to pay the ransom, does that mean you cannot afford to keep your staff and essentially mean the end of your business? Now, there are so many decisions and questions, and hopefully you're able to avoid having to ask these questions by taking proper precautions. Now, a question I'm often asked when it comes to malware is, how do I know if my device is infected? There are a few signs. Your device's performance has dropped. Maybe it's running really slow. Maybe the battery drains super quick. Maybe your device just keeps overheating, right? These are signs that your processor is running at capacity and you've potentially got some nasty malware running around in the background. Are you finding strange files, toolbars, programs appearing on your computer or mobile device? That is another classic sign of malware. Frequent error messages. If the basic functionality of your device is seriously impaired, this could be a sign of malware. If your web browser is automatically taking you to a web page that you did not intend to open, that's another thing to be suspicious about. Suspicious pop-ups asking you to update or download a program is another red flag. And finally, unusual account activity or unexpected password changes. Now, this is a big one, as some of the more common types of malware nowadays, they don't usually show all of these more obvious signs. Often, they'll try to remain as hidden as possible so they can continue to extract information on a personal business, even after they've scammed them or sold the data on. In situations where we're seeing the same person or organization being scammed multiple times with no real idea of how it's happening in the first place, malware is often to blame, which is why it's crucial you respond to a potential malware infection as swiftly as possible. Now, while there are a number of precautions you can take to improve your cybersecurity, one of the best and most inexpensive ones is reviewing your accounts and your current passwords. Instead of using a password, we recommend you use a passphrase. Passphrases are made up of 3 or more random words that make them stronger than a traditional password. This makes them harder to guess, but easy to remember. Now, changing your passwords to a passphrase is a great way to improve your cybersecurity. Passphrases are longer than passwords, which makes them more resistant against dictionary and brute force attacks. Now, to create a strong passphrase, we want to avoid personal information, use a combination of uppercase and lowercase letters, numbers, and special characters. Now, if someone can guess your passphrase based on what they know or find out about you, your accounts could be at risk. So on that note, I've got another question for you to see what you know about password strength. How long would it take a supercomputer to brute force crack a password like special fried rice $24? Now note that this contains over 13 characters, uses a mix of numbers, letters, and special symbols. The answer could be 9 weeks, 10 months, 13 years, or over 15,000 years. Now, believe it or not, it's actually over 15,000 years. If a supercomputer kept running random combinations in the hope that it would crack your password, on average, you're going to be safe for at least 15,000 years. Yeah, so strong passwords are really important. Criminals can steal personal information through poor password practices. There's also software that hackers and criminals can use that can submit those guesses per minute to try and crack that password and log in. If a word doesn't give access, they'll modify it and they'll try other iterations. So sophisticated criminals have a lot of firepower here, but as we've just learned, a really strong password can offer 15,000 years of protection. So here are a few tips to help you create stronger passwords. First one, longer is stronger. So we want passwords that are at least 14 characters or longer. We want to complicate it by adding a mix of numbers, letters, and special characters. You want to avoid using any personal information, such as names or special dates. Your child's birthday is probably a very bad password idea. We also recommend that you make a password that is a passphrase. So as I said earlier, it's a sentence, or it's 3 words that sort of fit together that make it sort of stand out. It's easy for you to remember, but difficult for others to guess. We want to avoid using the same password across multiple accounts. People love to recycle passwords, but if your password or one account gets compromised, you better believe that criminals are going to use your email address and that password and try it on every other login they can possibly think of, trying to get more of your personal information. You want to be aware of your overshare, right? You do not want to be sharing passwords or writing them down or saving them to a browser so you don't need to log in again. These are often targets for cyber criminals. So keeping your password to yourself is really, really crucial. You want to consider a password manager. You're going to need to conduct your own research on this and find one that's best suited to your needs. And ensure that you purchase from a reputable vendor that commits to ongoing maintenance and regular security updates. As a representative of New South Wales government, I can't recommend one, but I'm sure by doing your own research, you'll be able to find something that suits your needs. And finally, you want to change your passwords often. We say that passwords should be like toothbrushes. You should keep them to yourself and change them often. Keeping it fresh is crucial to keeping yourself safe. Now, if you want to test the strength of your passwords, ID Support has created the password strength tester that anyone can access on our website. And when you enter your password, the strength tester uses complicated algorithms to figure out how hard it is to guess your password. It then gives you tips on how to make your password stronger. It lets you know if your passwords have been hacked or exposed in a data breach, and it helps you understand the impact and what you can do to make your passwords safer. We never collect, track, or store, or send your passwords anywhere. It is literally just assessing the combination of letters, numbers, and special characters, so no one can link them to your usernames, accounts, or websites. Now, if you've fallen victim to identity theft, scam, or cybercrime, it is important you report it. Firstly, it can reduce the amount of scam emails you may receive, which makes you a harder target for scammers. This information also allows agencies to identify any new or current trends and scams, and they can warn businesses and consumers. And it can help protect others as reports get shared with law enforcement and banks and other companies that can take steps to stop scammers. Personally, I think going to report cyber should be a first step, because a report to report cyber is going to flow through to New South Wales Police and us at ID Support New South Wales. After you've made that report, you don't need to wait for Police or ID Support New South Wales to get back to you. You can proactively reach out to us if you'd like. Police have a dedicated assistance line on 131 444, whereas ID Support, you can call us during business hours on 1-800-001-040. We will from you regardless of how big or small the issue is. We prefer people call us with questions or concerns that they might think are silly than calling us after they've been scammed. False alarms are always better than remediation. eSafety and ScamWatch are also fantastic resources. eSafety will give you those tips around being safe online, and ScamWatch is great for scam trends. You can also report scams there to give others a better picture of what Australians are facing scam-wise. Now, prevention is undeniably more effective than the cure when it comes to safeguarding personal information and identity documents. These straightforward steps, aligned with our previous discussion on the types of scams, are crucial for preventing these threats. So first, on our cybersecurity fundamentals, data security. We want to install security software and review data security practices and systems. You may need to engage an expert to undertake an end-to-end security review. But it is really important that you discover any gaps before somebody else does. Now, secondly, you want to make sure that you have strong and complex passwords for your accounts. Strong passwords are really, really great. You can also back them up with multi-factor authentication. That really fortifies your online accounts. And yeah, it just sort of gives you that extra layer of protection. So that can be biometrics or a unique code sent to a mobile device after you've typed in your password. It requires that you have more than a password to be able to log into your system. That second method of authentication provides extra protection, even if your username or password is compromised. Business processes. We want to back up data in a secondary location and encrypt important information. Taking regular backups is critical, as it is a way for you to protect your data, and it's super important that it's not only backed up, but that it's protected, keeping systems up to date with the latest upgrades. You want to assess the security of any third-party systems that your business uses. You want to ensure contracts with third parties have provisions on data retention and disposal. Don't be afraid to ask the tough questions of your third parties. Minimum storage, we also spoke about the importance of this, collecting the data in the first place and only storing what you have to. Access control, we want to manage employee access. Now, this is not about trusting your employees, but making sure you minimize any opportunities for an attacker to access and control your systems. It's also important to make sure that you delete and remove any old users. Automatic updates, you want to keep your system up to date with the latest upgrades, ensure automatic operating systems updates are enabled as well, as that installs all the latest security stuff to protect your software. Software updates, they'll often fix security flaws, and outdated software can be riddled with security holes and easily exploited by hackers. So this one is super, super important. Training staff, helping your employees understand the importance of cybersecurity and what these threats look like day to day can make all the difference if a cyber attack is attempted. Upskill yourself and your team to know what to look for. Your employees and your staff, they're your first line of defense in spotting these online dangers, like phishing, as we discussed earlier. Next, you want to develop a culture of reporting. You want to encourage people to speak up if an incident occurred. The faster you know about it, the faster you can take action. You want to work with your team to resolve the issue and make improvements. And finally, you need to implement a breach response plan. In the event of a breach, it's an emergency situation and people panic, and they may make decisions they regret later. Perfect preparation prevents poor performance. So you want to do the hard work now, so you're not doing it at 2 a.m. in the morning after the attack has happened. Now, I want to be clear, there are no set of strategies that are going to guarantee you will be completely safe against cyber threats. But when these things are implemented, it makes it much harder for an attacker to compromise your system. Taking the time to put these strategies in place now can really put you in a much better place. You don't want to be spending the money to repair this, and you don't want to be damaging your reputation with your customers. As I said earlier, prevention is much better than a cure. Now, if you are looking for more resources or information, we have plenty available on our website. We've got a suite of online learning modules covering a range of topics like social media, online shopping, cryptocurrency, and many more. These on-demand, self-paced e-learning courses make training and education accessible to everyone. There's no logins, no paywall, no need to provide personal information. You can register for our events. You can sign up for our quarterly newsletter to keep on top of latest news and trends around identity theft and scams. We also have our password strength tester and our small business resources like the Pirate tool, and a great page on the types of scams that we're seeing at the moment. I want to thank you all for watching this recording of our special small business session. I hope that I was able to raise some awareness of the threats you guys might be facing and provide you with some steps to take away and implement into your own routines. Please check out our website by going to newsouthwales.gov.au and searching ID support. Also, please feel free to call us and speak with one of our advisors between 9 a.m. and 5 p.m. Monday to Friday on 1-800-001-040 if you're affected or need help. Thank you for your time today, and remember, your identity is important. Let's protect it.